Hello everybody, welcome back to From Rhythm to Algorithm. Very rare double episode day. Not actually rare, typically I derive the next episode when I'm editing the one I recorded that day. So I just had enough information to do enough today, another one today, get to the Russian video later, maybe still today, but anyway, picking up where we left off this morning. We talked a lot about spelling, obviously we'll get back to that. But a conjecture is a hypothesis. Right, if somebody says I have a conjecture, or the Riemann hypothesis, which we solved here on this channel, right, what's the difference? Why is there two different words? Right, typically when people are talking about science, the process of creating an experiment, they'll talk about a hypothesis. Or if you're talking about pure mathematics, they typically say a conjecture. But they're identical. I mean, they're functionally the exact same thing. Because now that we've proven physics or language is consistent, a conjecture, something that is purely mathematical, so to speak, doesn't exist. Now, it's not to say applied mathematics, like going to develop an algorithm for an engineering application, isn't different than quote-unquote pure mathematics, but you're connecting logic, which is based on physics. So there's no such thing as pure mathematics. And a conjecture is a hypothesis in the exact, I mean, there's no logical difference. But sensorality is the thesis. Again, just connecting more things. Clearly, the thesis is based on the and is. Again, so like that one, thesis, doesn't have a clear base word to me. It's the, s, and then is. And our fundamental stability of two is going to be very poignant, where it's like each word can only be iterated twice. There's only two base words, something to that effect. But sensorality is not theoretical, right? Life is literal. I am literally sitting here, Brad, a cognizant, conscious being talking to you, or talking to the camera and you're watching the camera, or the video on the YouTubes. Yeah, but theory, because that's another thing when people say, I have a theory. We covered this way back at like the very first episode of From Rhythm to Algorithm, right? People don't have theories, or you have explanations. And so I don't say, when I said vibrational information theory, I hate the word theory. I don't even know what it's supposed to mean. Right, life is literal, life exists. And so I just had to form some sort of, logical structure to deduce and to show you that words have meaning when you already function. Every facet of your life is, you already know, but words have meaning. And so, right, sensorality is not theoretical, vibrational information is not theoretical, it's just a structure to introduce mathematical proofing. But rhetoric is linguistically related to theoretical. What is the relationship of sizing and spacing? I was just editing my, on DaVinci Resolve is typically the one I use for these, just to get, for whatever reason on Apple iMovie, you can't even like move text around, which seems beyond bonkers to me, but you do you, Apple. But sizing and spacing, this morning we were talking about, you can talk really fast, really slow, you can have unintelligible sounds coming. It doesn't change, like what is a word, what is a syllable when the word breaks. So like what is the relationship of sizing and spacing? We talked about this, like I said, I guess it's just all proportional. It's probably where we're going with this, is that, again, those proportionalities holds, whether we're having a congruent triangle with the same internal angles, doesn't matter how the absolute size of that triangle, same kind of things with syllability. Spelling, spellality, all right, just spell with an ality at the end, right? How do you generalize spelling? Just throw an ality on the bad boy, spellality. But right, so ing, like when do we go from like sing as the base fundamental syllable to, spell-ing, right? We never have spelling-ality. I mean, I guess you could, but it doesn't occur. Don't know. Posing questions where they should be posed. But sensorality is spellality. Syllability, spellality. Spellality is spellability. All right, spellability, syllability. Trying to get a more concrete, I remember this was very poignant with speciality as well. Again, I'm not looking at it, like I said, it doesn't help or hurt, but there's no point to. But syllability is spelling. Spelling orders syllables. Sensorality, symbols. So the big thing, right when I cut off on the beginning episode, this to go make fun of Emily, whatever, who's a criminal, but she is. How you can truly get in front of a stage, take money, and say a new paradigm for mathematical proofing when you're directly stealing from everything I've ever done, and there's nothing else for you to say. Like, logical exhaustion is there is no more words to use. But I'm glad you're out there, Emily, whoever, fuck you. I'm glad you get to go live a life, bitch. Disgusting, truly disgusting. So obviously, their mathematics is irrelevant, but as human beings, they don't even raise to the level of morality that would qualify as a human being. Sensorality symbols, right? But right, a letter is a symbol. You're symbolically representing a sound. And so rhythm symbol, you can see that YM in symbol is kind of close to rhythm. Again, they're just related linguistically. Sensorality symbolizes. Sensorality is symbolizationality. Spelling is symbolizationality. Spelling is symbolic. All right. Every letter is a symbol. A symbol is a character. A character is a representation. Symbols represent meaning. Again, I could just continue on, but it's just looking for this fundamental theorem at this point. Well, really the whole time, but I could literally just sit here and list theorems. I could just read you my derivation notebook and just never stop. Absurdity is insanity. I put it on screen in the last episode, just connecting more of these logical pieces. Because remember, we're pushing out our logic on all of these different fronts, and now we're getting to this centralization, this convergent aspect of the proof. And so we're pulling this all back in, when fundamentally we're not really saying that many different things. We're just working out all of the context in which censorship arises. Meaning is semanticality. Sensorality is semantic. Again, clearly we can see mean and semantic, right? If you take the word means, it literally rearranges to meaning or semantic, or semanticality is like, again, the suffixing. But semantic and meaning are literally just iterations of one another, like all of these other words I'm showing you. Semanticality is dynamicality, right? And we can see the semantic. So now here we have a fundamental dichotomistic pair is what I think I called them, right? Conservation, conversation. You flip the S and the V, they iterate, they reciprocate, they're reciprocal, fundamental reciprocity, whatever you want to call it. Very clearly semantic and dynamic, right? The SE and the DY are effectively prefixes here, but the M and the N in semantic flips for the N and the M in dynamic. So that's a fundamental iteration, that's a fundamental reciprocal, if you want to call it that, a fundamental conjugate, I guess you could probably even say it that far. But the same type of thing when you're doing cross multiplication with fractions and you simplify, we're doing the same type of thing, but again, I don't know if it's because of chirality, if it's some sort of geometric relationship, but you flip these things, right? They flip them to not preserve symmetry so you can be open, so you have some of this entropy, the ability to build on for the future. But semantic and dynamic are fundamental reciprocals, fundamental conjugates. I don't know what you want to call them, but you can clearly see the N and the M iterate with reciprocity. They just switch. But meaning changes, right? Everything is dynamic. We live in 3 dimensions. I'm going to live and die, and this will be a nice... This is literally going... This park is going to be a fucking historical site, actually. Which is fucking crazy. But meaning changes. Everything changes, right? I'm going to live and die. You're going to live and die. Even the Earth, right? Earth on a large scale will be swallowed up by the sun. The sun will become a white dwarf or whatever the fuck... What type of star do we got? We got a red giant out there? I don't think it's big enough for a red giant. I forget what type of star the sun is, our sun. But the whole point is everything changes. And so dynamicality is changing. Charging. What is charging, right? To charge is to rush. If I'm physically charging at you, charge! I'm running at you, I'm rushing. To charge is to tense, right? Now this is kind of, right, tension is discrepancy. When I put my phone battery and I'm charging it up, there's a battery in there. I want to say capacitor. I don't know if I'm using that exactly correctly, but you're separating charge. You're creating an electric potential. And then when you go out and use your phone, you're diffusing that potential through a circuit. And so to charge is to tense. And remember, tensing, right, you know it very easily from emergently, like if there's a lot of motion in the room, it's tense. Or if you're going to move or, concentrically contract your muscles, you're tensing. But tensing is just discrepancy from equilibrium. And so to charge is to tense, to separate positive and negative away from equilibrium, this dynamic stability of where they're interacting, all positive on one side, all negative on one side, and then you hit power, you stream a video, and it diffuses that charge, and that's when your battery runs out, is when your charge is not, it's back to equilibrium. So when you're charging something, you're tensing it. And to charge is to file. Again, if you're charging somebody with a crime, you're filing charges. Censorality limits criminality. Criminality, minimality. Expansion limits minimality. And now I just have, because now we're into, because remember, censorality is not a word. And so we're using this constructed variable to assign the syllables, because remember, all of this language is differentiated. We live in 3 dimensions. Everything we're doing is showing you from the buildup of the past, again, to some level, still in the past, it's definitive, that gives us this dynamic definition for censorality with an S. And remember, we're solving censorality with a C, I think. I still think so. But now we have one of these where we say, you know, we've proven you don't have true paradox. You don't have true contradiction. People create contradictions because they're inconsistent. But that's just a facet of choice. And so expansion limits minimality. And it does, right? If you're limiting what is minimal, you're getting bigger. But like, why is it defined in a double negative? So we're kind of creating effectively, I think this is what we're getting to. Again, I forget what we did with speciality, but expansion limits minimality. It's a weird way to say expansion exists, right? It's like we've introduced a double negative. But it's like packaging, we're not changing anything semantically, logically. What we're saying still means the same. We're just saying it with more words and more syllables. And so limiting minimality is like kind of this like double negative thing. But it's not logically inconsistent, right? Expansion limits minimality. Expansion maximizes. So why don't you say maximize? Again, it's some sort of, we're creating a false paradox to solve it with censorality, or solve it with censorality with a C, or something to that effect. But awareness limits censorship. And you might have to think about that for a second, but then I say censorship limits awareness, right? If something's restricted from disclosure and you can't learn about it, you're not aware of it. So then why did I say awareness limits censorship? And I did. I said I'm reading to them as they came to me. Because if you're more aware of how the world works, you're less likely to hide it from people, right? If I say fuck or shit, or if I limit saying fuck or shit around my parents, it's just because they're not used to, I don't say they're not used to hearing those words because they live in the same world we do, but it's just like, why have any sort of formality, any walking on eggshells and being this polite and crude when it's like, we're all just fucking animals. But awareness, if you become more understanding of the world around you, right, you might, if you're teaching a young kid and they ask you about sex, or if they ask you about violence, you'll probably answer appropriately to their age, but you're not going to tell them it doesn't exist, or the world's a big happy place out there, or again, just say something that isn't true. You'll probably scale it back to, a level or more understanding they have with maybe less nuance. But if you're more aware of the world around you, you're less likely to censor it for somebody else. Speciality is wary, right? Sensorality is where. Sensorality is awareness. So now we're getting conceptually and intuitively to a point where we don't even need to say the word sensorality. It's just your awareness. It's your perception. And it is. That's what each individual being is a sentient being capable of sensation. So when I say we're going to swallow up sensorality, we're kind of there intuitively. We haven't finalized that, but we're trailblazing a big proof, and then we're going to look back, and that's what sensorality is going to be. Awareness is perspective. Sensation is perspective. Sensorality is perception. Perception, perspective. And we can clearly see again that perspective to perception, we're dropping the S. Again, as long as I'm spelling it correctly, and I can straight up spell things wrong or say something that are objectively wrong, but when you do very literally millions of theorems, and if I spell one wrong, it doesn't really detract from anything. But perspective, you can see that speciality, like I said, sensorality has to contain speciality, but it's really all just one big theorem. It's the same word family. And all language is related because everything is vibration that's just differentiated. But sensorality is perception. Perceptionality censors, right? Your perception censors the information coming into you. So now we're again just logically rearranging our linguistics. I'm saying stuff so you know it intuitively makes sense, and then we're using different words to articulate those experiences. So perception censors, and that's censor with an S, right? Because that rock does not have perception, and that rock has never articulated a theorem. So again, it doesn't have this. When you say a rock feels something, it doesn't. A rock thinks, it doesn't. But it exists. Like I said, it has presence, but it's not thinking. It's obviously not existing like you or I. What is exceptionality? Again, just another question where it's just you clearly take off a prefix. Commencement is inception, right? Inception, the movie. Nope, when something starts, when it commences, it begins. Inception is commencement. Sensorality is inceptional, right? Life started. There was existence before life, but now there is life that is inanimate and life that is not inanimate. That is us. And so it's like when I'm talking about getting the I, right? Literally the letter I that represents E, right? Because again, we're generalizing language because language is already general, or it is already naturally generalized, but we're building it up, and so like we have to like remove like the I, like me personally, like not me personally, but any individual on a personal level has to generalize it. And removing that letter I is literally when you say I, Brad, I am, so to, you know, so on and so forth. But sensorality started, it's inceptional. But now again, we have one of these, again, we're so fucking close, we have to be. Because now we have exceptional, right? Speciality is exceptional, and that was our functional definition, I don't know, 2 weeks ago. Because like I said, I don't redo any of this stuff, or rewatch anything. And so, but we have, right, exceptional, right? Sensorality is inceptional, and so clearly X is kind of like a prefix towards out, right? If it's your ex-girlfriend, she's out of your life, right? If it's an X something, it's out, and if it's in, it's with. But exceptional, speciality is exceptional, sensorality is not exceptional, sensorality is inceptional. Again, just showing you this connection of logic. But again, inceptional is not a word, but it still preserves that logical opposition to exceptional. But it's not direct, it's not its natural opposite, it's not its natural definition. Inspiration, inception. Sensorality inspires. Spire, require. And that's where I finished up for the derivation for round 2 for today. So I'm going to finish that there, move on to my reading in Russian video. So thank you for watching. Please pay me. Again, my constitutional rights are violated. My humanitarian rights are violated. I feel profoundly disgusting every second of every minute of every day, and I am the victim of crime. And all I need for all of that to stop is one person to do the right thing one time. But does that person exist? No. Is there a single person on this fucking planet with morals, character, and integrity, and frankly enough, I don't even say courage, with enough knowledge to do the right thing? Besides me, there's not a single fucking person. Not one person. So thank you for watching, enjoy your free shit, continue to commit crimes, and I will see you on the next one. And in a blink of an eye, none of us will be here anymore, and your profound, disgusting, horrendous behavior will be solidified, will be set in stone for the rest of humanity and the rest of all life on Earth to sit there and wonder, why the fuck is everybody so fucking disgusting? But way to set an example for your progeny. Thank you for watching. See you on the next one.